Hi, this is Jim Ericson. I'm editorial director at Information Management Magazine, and I'm here with two great resources to our industry at the Data Warehousing Institute Conference here in San Diego. Paul Kautza, Philip Russom, head of research at TDWI, and we're at the San Diego event. There's a lot of activity, a lot of instruction going on, and a lot of talk about Agile BI again. This is a term I know you guys have kind of centered around and built as sort of a gathering point for, I think, what is a requirement, a business requirement, actually, that needs to be supported in IT and by pretty much everybody in the organization, and that's agility, time to market, the ability to adjust, deal with dynamics in the market, and so forth. So, and I think it's a great gathering, point to talk around this topic. So, Paul, I know you've sort of taken the Agile ball and run with it in a way. You're kind of breaking it out a little bit in terms of how it applies to different parts of the structure. So what's that about?
Well, about 18 months ago, I had Ralph Hughes, who's the author of the Agile Data Warehouse, had him come do one class for me on a Friday because I had heard a lot about Agile. It was starting to pick up some speed. I had 75 people on a Friday sit all day for Ralph. So I said, maybe I have something here. Yeah. So we started doing that over the next few conferences. In San Diego last year, we actually themed the conference about building an Agile BI environment. But I looked at it a little broader because Agile software development has been around for a long time, right? Well, if you just take the software development side, you flap that over to business intelligence or data warehousing, you probably aren't going to be real successful with it. You have to look at it much more broadly. So I like what Ken Collier said about being Agile versus doing Agile. If we just do Agile, we're probably going to be less successful than if we be Agile. So I started looking at how can I look at Agile as a word versus a methodology.
Right, okay.
So I have basically 4 pillars, and the first one is the Agile methodology, where I give Ralph Hughes, Ken Collier, Larry Burns, the people who are teaching for me, the deference to go through the methodology portions of Agile. But then I look beyond that and say, where do we need to be more Agile? Because one of the things that Agile doesn't do a very good job at is look at data modeling. So underneath that first pillar, I've also got data modeling and how do we be more Agile in our modeling. And Len Silverstone has actually developed a new class for this conference called Building the Agile Data Model. So the first really is Agile methodology. But then as we look at how do we just be more Agile, we look at analytics. How do we be more agile in how we deliver analytics to our business users? We talk about dashboards and scorecards or canned reports. Those probably aren't really agile to our business users. So how do we get more agile in our delivery of our analytics? And then we look, the next one to me, which is the most important one, is the agile organization.
Right.
We talk about one of the pillars of agile is collaboration. And one of the things I think that makes it successful is they truly do collaborate between business and IT. So how do we be more agile across our organizations and get them working together? And the fourth one is really our infrastructure. How do we be more agile in our infrastructure? Look what's happened over the last 3 to 5 years. We've got cloud computing, we've got software as a service, we've got platform as a service, we've got all these different services and components. So how do we be more agile in how we implement our BI data warehousing solutions? And by doing that, the cost, if you look at the cost components of cloud and all these pieces, it actually kind of levels the playing field and allows more small to medium-sized businesses actually be more competitive more quickly because they don't have to build that infrastructure internally. So I'm taking a rather broad view from an education standpoint across Agile. So that's kind of where I'm going from an education standpoint.
Yeah, and I think you're really flying that flag pretty well. And I think part of what you're talking about too are some of the really emergent soft skills and crossover skills between business and technology. We've always taken the model of business plus IT, where maybe we can just separate the I and the T also and focus around the information. So I think it speaks to a lot of that, foot in 2 camps, the collaborative states, but also kind of some of the morphing roles. Philip, you're a very methodological you're a methodology guy. You've done a lot of research and writing, and you're very, very steeped in this topic. Where is the tip of the spear now? Is it in collaboration and in alignment, or the tools? Where are you focused?
Yeah, I'm just going to answer one non-question before I get to those. Speaking of methodologies, like you brought up, we just to be sure that people watching the video are clear about this. There is the older Agile methodology, Agile development, and there's the Agile manifesto, and that's been with us, 12, 15 years now, and there are lots of especially large organizations with Agile development teams, but they're not doing BI. They're typically writing a lot of code It is procedural code. The procedures typically automate business process and quite often automate transactional systems. And it's very code heavy.
Right.
And there was it was a reaction years ago to try and streamline a lot of the code-based methodologies. If you think about things like code review, peer review, if you think about the way that code is promoted from development to test to production, and all the almost bureaucratic processes that go with that, so a lot of our brethren in operational applications kind of came up with their own methodology.
Yep.
And a lot of people will push back and say, no, Agile's not really a method. It's really a set of goals. And, I'll go with that, and let's don't belabor that too much. But the goals are very relevant to us, even though we're not doing the same kind of heavy hand coding they're doing. Certain amount of hand coding in data warehousing, yeah, sure, but nowhere near what those guys are doing. So if we just look at some of the goals, they came up with the word Agile. They just want to be more nimble in their work.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, Agile's the wrong word. I think what we're all looking for is just to speed things up. And a lot of times, also with methodologies, a lot of times people say, well, method's great, but I'm a businessman or woman, I don't really care what the guys in the cubes do,
Right,
as long
sure.
as they crank it out.
Sure.
Well, actually you should care, because, especially in business intelligence, because what the men and women are doing in the cubes takes a long time. And I mean, we've all heard the classic complaint, man, I just want a new report. Right. Or even simpler, I just want a revision of an existing report. And it took 6 weeks for me to even get a response, another 6 weeks for kind of a review, a third 6 weeks for approval. 6 months out, I'm still waiting for this report. Where did it come from? And it's no joke. The pace of business just accelerates. So it's really a need for the business people to get the products of business intelligence sooner to them. Right. Because with the pace of business, especially where the recession drove all kinds of changes, even the recovery is driving changes because companies are trying to realign to the new reality, the new economy. 6 months later, the thing you asked for is not really all that relevant anymore.
Exactly.
So it's really, instead of Agile, we're just trying to
Right?
deliver a product, a useful product sooner.
Sure.
And this is true whether you're in operational applications or you're just trying to create that report, or you're the data warehouse architect or data warehouse modeler and you're trying to get new tables, new data structures ready in the data warehouse. If you're the data integration specialist, you're trying to get more interfaces in place, trying to get more ETL jobs established and ready to go. That's the thing. See, business intelligence, data warehousing, we talk about it like it's one big monolith, but really it's different layers of discipline. So there are different men and women who do different things there. In a lot of ways, it's hard to talk about Agile BI because you're going to have to do different things to speed up development if you're at the data warehouse and modeling level as opposed to the data integration level.
Well, what you just said, I think, is right because while all these people are off doing their knitting.
Yep.
The market's down 600 points and plans are getting canceled and people are scratching their heads, about tomorrow. Yep. I'm working on my project. I'm doing my business. So to sort of Paul's point about sort of looking at this from different corners of the organization or different activities, maybe even, I think you've sort of identified that there are different areas in Agile that are easier or harder to do.
Yes.
Maybe they're focal points going forward. What about that?
Real quick, and we'll get back to Paul. I think a precedence has actually been in report development.
Yeah.
And in fact, before we started calling it Agile BI, really a lot of teams had gone to this highly iterative process where someone would propose a new report, typically some kind of business user, and then you'd get a fairly quick response to them and go through the catalog and say, well, in our body of reports, we have something that seems really similar to what you're asking for. And for a lot of teams, they would just start altering existing reports and say, is this getting closer to the look and feel you want? And you try to tell the business person, forget data for the moment. We're just talking about presentation and delivery. Does this look like the kind of delivery you're looking for?
Right.
And that would be highly iterative. And in fact, you'd have the report developer and the business person in the room together. And some people were doing this 12 years ago. And so that's actually been a really great precedence for Agile BI. And I think of that kind of report development as being the thing that's easily made agile.
Yeah, as you were saying, you don't need a meeting for that.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's one of the the real breaths of fresh air that this whole Agile conversation has brought us to is to say, we've been trying to get business and IT to talk for how many years, right? So now, as a cornerstone of this methodology, it's an open collaborative environment between business and IT. You have to have that to make it work. And the other thing that I think has really accelerated the stuff we're talking about, report definition and things, is we don't have to come up with a monolithic requirements document before we can start. Requirements, because of the close collaboration and the interaction, the true interaction between business and IT, that requirements process is much more interactive, more iterative, and it can change and be more flexible on the fly. So we don't have to wait 6 weeks to get approval on this. Or everything is much more condensed, and the collaboration effort is much more, and your business requirements gathering isn't, I'm going to go do that, and then I'm going to put it over here and let it collect dust while I go to everything else for 6 months. It's iterative and it keeps building.
That calls for a new kind of project manager too, because those are playbook guys.
Yes,
I mean, I've worked with them. We all work with them in our own organizations, and you know how it goes. You do gather. You write it out. You spell it. They stick to they're schedule hawks, and schedules tend to move out. And they tend to. Well, we'll meet on this in a week, and a week is not the right.
Or they come back. Well, wait a second. I have to revise my Gantt chart.
And that's a completely different education for me. I mean, Kevin Collier developed a class called Agile Leadership. And he taught it on Sunday. We're going to do that for a full day class because it's a very different process. People have to think differently because a lot of the self-selection of teams, the self-management of teams, that's very, very different than how we've run traditional BI.
No, absolutely. I think these are all great issues, and I think it is going to call for a sort of a re-identification of skills in the marketplace. We do look at technology a lot, and it's an important enabler, and some of the tools I think that we're working with now really are helping us do our jobs. So it really does come back to that mindset and steering, rowing in the same direction. So what do you think?
Also, just tying on to what you're talking about there, if we're really to become more agile, more speedy in delivering BI products, there have to be some changes made in process, but also in mindset. The mindset I run across, I'm dealing with a lot of back-end data issues as well as data integration. And, we have some really excellent best practices in data warehousing. We really do, around very carefully studying to be sure we find just the right sources, being very careful with data transformations to make sure it's really that we're not losing any value from the data as we transform, that we're going to models that are really going to be useful. With those models, we really want to have hefty metadata management, nowadays master data management, and other things that help us to document and beef up the semantics around data. I could go on and on. You've heard this before. This is sacrosanct stuff.
Absolutely.
And you start talking against that stuff, there are people who push back and say, no, wait, I've built my career on this rather slow-moving but high-quality process.
Exactly.
And see, that's the thing. How do we speed it up without losing the quality of data, without losing the intelligence of models, and so on and so forth? That's one of the really hard parts.
That's a real soft skill thing, too. I mean, it is. You got some. I go to a show like this, I meet some of the most intelligent, left-brain people. I could never, understand after a certain point once they got into their stuff. But you also understand the success criteria in a business now is a lot more immediate, a lot more demanding. So,
I think in a lot of those things, and also it's funny. It's not just Agile. There are certain areas where a lot of the work is being shifted. So much of the work we do in BI, data warehousing, data modeling has been front-loaded. We've got a lot of this planning process, the requirements thing, and I'm seeing across the board. I'm seeing a lot of people just pushing real fast to get to some kind of prototype. And once you get to the prototype, that's when the iterations kick in. That's when things we associate with Agile kick in. And the thing is, there's a lot of prototype. And here's the catch. I have a Russian friend.
Always a catch.
I have a Russian friend of mine. He says there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. So you have to be careful with prototypes because sometimes people, especially business folks, they go, well, it's close enough, deploy it. So we have to be willing to, create a prototype quickly, but also understand that a lot of them should die. And die away. And see, that's the thing. You don't want to put too much of this front-loaded work into a prototype that's going to die. You wait until the prototypes that have survived, and then that's when you go back and do all that careful data preparation I talked about, and all the really careful, accoutrements of fine report design, right? So does that make any sense? You just wait to see what prototype survives.
I think that's as we move forward in this whole Agile methodology, Agile world, that's where some of the rub is really going to start to happen, is
Yep.
when they really start getting into your world where you live every day,
Right.
to say, okay, how do I grow this from the standpoint of making an enterprise? How do I
Yeah.
do that and get that done? That's where I think some of the rub they haven't figured out yet. And I mean, I think they'll get there. I think we'll get there as a community, but it's gonna take some time.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, another area that comes to mind, it's hard for me to have a conversation without bringing up big data analytics recently. But the kind of open-ended discovery analytics we're finding with big data recently is agile inherently. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it does what I was just talking about. You typically grab a lot of raw source data. You typically have one or a small team of business analysts who put together a analytic data set very quickly with little or no concern about preparing the data. And really, they're just they're trying to build an early data set that will help give them the aha moment or answer some business question. And once they do this stuff that really looks like poor practices compared to what we usually do, then they sort of realize what should survive from that process. And that's when they go back and they start doing all the careful stuff to institutionalize it. Because even in something that's as free-form almost as riding the range with no barbed wire kind of thing as this big data analytics, even that eventually should have a product of BI that does have all the careful semantics and a really good body of reports to go with it.
It just goes to show us, I think, that not only is the business environment dynamic, but the technology environment's dynamic too, and it's all the more reason for this sort of collaborative and engaged. As you say, just faster. Maybe the word's not agile. Maybe it's just about faster. But that's all about engagement. It's about people skills, and you see the speakers here, and you can understand why people are successful at what they do. Mm-hmm. They're very smart, but they're also really good communicators, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, okay, more fun stuff ahead.
Yeah, I think we can count on that, and we'll be looking forward to that. I don't think we solved the problems of the world today, but it was a good start, right? And we'll see what the stock market brings us. No, just kidding. It's been great talking to Paul Kautza and Philip Russom with the Data Warehousing Institute. I'm Jim Ericson with Information Management Magazine. Check out the resources at TDWI.org and information-management.com. Thanks very much.